We're breaking down Richard No's second species argument that he lays out in AGI Safety from First Principles. And today we're going to be looking at the second pillar of his argument, the idea that we will develop agentic AGI that pursues large-scale goals. Before I get into that pillar of his argument, I'd like to talk about Richard's level of confidence. And the first thing I should say is that there's lots of uncertainty. Richard acknowledges this. There's a lot of uncertainty that he has. He's by no means certain that these four things will happen in sequence. Okay, but we have to keep in mind that the development of AGI could be the most consequential invention in the history of the world. So it's worth spending lots of time thinking about, even if the case even if this second species argument is not, bulletproof. Okay, it makes sense to spend a lot of time scrutinizing these arguments, thinking about this, thinking about how we would prepare for worst case scenarios and a lot of different types of worst case scenarios. Okay, Richard's level of confidence. He's most confident in this first pillar, the idea that we'll eventually develop superintelligent AGI. Second, he's most confident in this last claim that if we develop that type of AI, it will be capable of taking control of the future from humanity, relegating us to a second species. His third most confident point is this third pillar, the idea that AGIs will be misaligned with human goals and values. And he has the least amount of confidence in the pillar that we're going to be investigating today, the idea that the AGI will be the type of AGI that's agentic and that pursues goals. So with that said, let's get into investigating this second pillar. We're going to have 3 chapters to this video. What does it mean for a system to be an agent? Will we develop agentic AGI or non-agentic AGI? And if we develop agentic AGI, why is that scary? Why might that be a problem? So let's talk about frameworks for agency. Richard's model for agency that he advances has 6 parts, right? And these are not binary, right? A specific system could have many different levels of these at all different levels. But Richard is claiming that the most agentic system would have all 6 of these dialed up to maximum. Self-awareness, the idea that the agent can model itself as an entity in the world and has some understanding that its actions influence the world, right? Richard is not, don't conflate this with the idea that the AGI will be conscious, right? Something can be unconscious, right? Perfectly unconscious, but still self-aware in the sense that as a system, it can model that it is a thing in the world and its actions have some influence on the world, okay? Planning, right? And particularly long-term planning, right? That seems to be a relevant factor for deciding whether or not something is an agent, whether it can make plans for the long term. Consequentialism, something is more agentic if it chooses which plan to follow based on its modeling of that plan's impact on states of the world. Scale, the larger scale the goals are of a system, the more agentic it should be assumed to be, right? If it has big, grand goals, it's going to be more agentic. Coherence, the system is not internally conflicted, right? It is driven towards one thing. It has no doubts about what it's trying to pursue. It is coherent at all layers, levels, and it's pursuing a goal. Flexibility, it can change its goals. It can change its path. It can change its path. It can change its plans depending on new information as it gets new information. It doesn't have to be locked into one specific plan. All right. Now, so this is Richard's model for thinking about agency. There are other models for thinking about agency, and I would strongly encourage you to go read Joseph Carlsmith's draft, Is Power Seeking AI an Existential Risk? He's going to cover a lot of the tasks of the topics that Richard covers. So reading these 2 in parallel is going to be a really good exercise, right, to cover a lot of the same topics and in multiple contexts. But Joseph is, he tries to think about the question, if we expect an AI to pose significant existential threat, what are some of the qualities it needs to possess, right? Advanced capabilities is number 1. We already talked about that in the superintelligence video from part 1. And then agentic planning and strategic awareness, right? So he has a little bit of a simpler model for what agentic AGI might look like. And he calls these APS systems. So again, just an alternative framing. And you may want to go read this in parallel with Richard's article. I would also strongly encourage you to check out posts by John Wentworth. He's interested in sorting out our understanding of the core ideas behind agency and goals. And his main thought is that we can't really make much progress on AI safety unless we really know what we're talking about when we're talking about agents and goals, these fundamental core premises that are at the heart of AI safety. So I would really strongly encourage you to read things like The Plan by John Wentworth, right? You can see in step 1, he's just sorting out fundamental confusions about agency. Okay, that's his first step. He thinks we have to do that before we can make much progress on anything else. Okay. He also has Why Agent Foundations, an overly abstract explanation. I encourage you to go read that as well if you're interested in learning more about agent foundations and things related to what we're talking about today. Will we develop agentic AI? Richard thinks there is great reason to expect that it will be. Training tasks that are trying to produce the agent that is most well suited for a particular goal may select for agency, because agency can be extremely useful for performing well on a training task. Right? Think about how helpful it would be to be flexible instead of inflexible. Right? Recursive improvement. Right? If we think about what we talked about last video, one of the drivers of progress in from human level intelligence to superintelligence is the idea that the AGIs will take control of AI research and will be recursively improving upon themselves, right? Making stronger and stronger AIs. And if agentic AGIs are better, then we may expect the AGIs to develop more and more agentic AGIs as this process of improvement goes on. There are big economic incentives to develop agentic AGI, right? Just because it's more effective. Right, there are major economic incentives to develop things like a CEO AGI, and we're probably going to want a CEO to be able to pursue its own goals, to be agentic. Okay, safety researchers would say to resist this economic incentive and to have the first AGI that we develop be as non-agentic as possible. Many AI safety researchers would say this: have the first AGI we develop be as non-agentic as possible, and employ this non-agentic AI to help us develop safe later agentic AGIs. Okay. Now the example of evolution. Evolution did not select. There was no pressure by evolution for humans to worry about anything beyond kind of the short term, right? Short term survival and reproducing, passing on your genes, and your local environment, right? Yet we have humans today who think about the long term, right? Look at us right now. We're looking at the very long term future. And humans who think about things that are happening way over on the other side of the world, right? So even though evolution did not select for these things, it popped up. So that's the reason for us to worry or to expect maybe that even if we don't try to select for agentic AGI, maybe we should expect agentic AGI to be selected for. Why is agentic AI scary? This book, Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom, is one of the most, if not the most influential texts about AI safety and the existential threat due to AI. It came out back in 2014. It's quite technical, but I would still encourage you to read it. It's influenced the field quite a bit. In this book, one of the things that Bostrom talks about is convergent instrumental subgoals. And the idea is that for most of the goals that we can think of, like a main goal that we would give to an AGI, there are subgoals that would be useful for that AI to reach in order to pursue its main goal. Things like keeping its original goal intact, right? It's not going to want its goal to change. If its goal is to maximize its goal, it's going to want to keep its goal intact. It's going to want to keep it the same. Resource acquisition, right? Most goals that an AGI will want to employ will be easier to employ if it's got a lot of power in the world, a lot of influence, a lot of resources, and self-preservation, right? You can't really, an AGI can't really pursue its goal if it's turned off, right? So preventing itself from being turned off. So the fact that the AGI is pursuing large-scale goals and that the AGI is agentic, it's likely going to have these convergent instrumental subgoals, okay? And that's pretty scary, especially not wanting to be turned off, even if we want to turn it off, if things are going wrong, and resource acquisition, right? Gaining influence, gaining power. These are scary things. In the next video, we will talk about this third pillar of Richard's argument, the idea that we should expect agentic superintelligent AGI to have goals that are at cross purposes with our own. And I encourage you to check the description and read all the links and articles that we've chatted about here. And I will see you next time.